You want the content raw, tight, and ready to record. Here's an 8-minute VO script in clear American English. No acts, no timeline notes, just the story. You could hear it coming, not on the scoreboard, but in the small, stupid ways a team gives a game away. 2 special teams touchdowns, late game brain cramps, a flurry of penalties when the clock got loud, and suddenly the Cleveland Browns, a team that showed flashes of promise earlier this season, looked like a franchise that forgot how to finish. Sunday's 27-20 loss to the New York Jets wasn't a single mistake. It was a catalog of tiny failures that add up to a very public problem. Fans saw it and reacted the way football fans react when anger meets helplessness. Fire the coach, clean house, do something dramatic. The noise is loud. The question is the noise justified? Here's what happened in the ugly, awful final sequence. Cleveland needed a stop with under 2 minutes remaining, a classic desperation defense moment. Instead, Devin Bush got flagged for defensive holding on 3rd and 16, gifting the Jets a fresh set of downs. Then, as if the universe wanted to underline every wrong choice, Cameron Thomas jumped offsides on a play nobody expected to snap, handing New York yet another free first down and the right to kneel out the clock. Those 2 flags weren't fancy. They weren't schematic failures. They were mental errors, the kind that scream, this team isn't locked in. That's the kind of thing fans see, remember, and use as evidence that the coach has lost the locker room. And that's why, by the final whistle, so many were calling for Kevin Stefanski's job. But let's slow down the emotional freight train and parse the anatomy of the defeat. This loss was messy in 3 places: special teams, protection, and discipline. The Browns surrendered touchdowns on both a kickoff and a punt. Those weren't fluke breakdowns that happen once a season. They are game-tilting plays that drift into the margins of your team's record. You can survive 1 return touchdown in a season, 2 in a single game, especially in a 27-20 loss, is a full team disservice. Then there were the 6 sacks taken by Dillon Gabriel, a figure that signals not just a quarterback problem, but a line and protection problem. And finally, the late defensive penalties. Mental mistakes at crunch time that any coach should be able to prevent with discipline and preparation. That combination is lethal for trust. Fans don't just want wins. In a season leaking hope, they want the team to look like it cares about the details. When the seams come apart in public, they assume leadership is to blame. Social feeds lit up with calls to fire Stefanski and even GM Andrew Berry. It's visceral. People want consequences when the product on the field looks like a ragged, unfocused outfit. You can understand that anger, but let's be honest about the ledger. Firing a coach is a blunt instrument. It creates theater, sure, but it rarely solves root causes immediately, especially mid-season. So who's to blame in a realistic sense? Start with the obvious: special teams. You can coach fundamentals until your voice gives out, but the unit that fields kickoffs and punts needs schematics, tackling drill reps, and disciplined lane assignments week to week. 2 return TDs in 1 game suggests preparation gaps, personnel issues, or both. That's on the coordinator and the special teams coaches, and by extension, the head coach for staffing and oversight. Next, the offensive line. 6 sacks are a red flag in any context. Whether it's communication on blitz pickup, slide protections, or simply physical mismatches, the line failed to protect the very asset the Browns bought hope with, their quarterback. And finally, the late-game defensive mental errors are the most damning because they're not schematic misfires. They're lapses in situational awareness. That's leadership territory, how you prepare the unit to play the final 6 minutes of the game. Now let's talk about the quarterback conversation, because it's stapled to this debate. Dillon Gabriel didn't throw any interceptions and did manage 2 touchdown passes, but sacks and pressure turned promising drives into nothing. If you're the coaching staff, you face the dilemma fans won't accept. Do you keep a young starter in place to see development through, or do you yank him for a rookie who, for all the hype, has no regular season reps? Kevin Stefanski chose the former: steadiness, process, and continuity. It's defensible. Development requires patience and protection, but patience only works when the basic supports, line play, special teams, situational discipline, are not actively sabotaging your plan. Right now, those supports are unreliable. That makes patience look like blind faith. Let's be pragmatic about consequences. Cleveland's playoff hopes are effectively gone after this loss. At 2-7, the upside for the rest of this season is slim. The focus inevitably shifts to draft position and evaluation. The next 5 weeks in this light are less about salvaging 2025 and more about answering questions for 2026. Who is your quarterback? Who on the roster is keepable? And how do you fix the units that collapsed in this game? That's cold but true. For ownership in the front office, this season now becomes an audit, a time to collect evidence, not press sound bites. If the tape shows repeated schematic and organizational failure, change will come. But if it shows correctable execution problems and bad weekday decision-making, the fix might be in personnel upgrades or coordinator changes. What should the Browns actually do in the short term? First, clean the fundamentals immediately. Special teams need schematic simplification, fewer risky return sets, improved lane discipline, and a clear tackler assignment plan. Second, protect the quarterback. Call quicker passing concepts, increase max protect packages in critical drives, and use rollouts and screens to counter heavy interior pressure. Third, address the mental errors with focused situational reps. Practice 2-minute defense, clock management, and snap discipline until the players respond without thinking. These are boring fixes, but they're the ones that stop the bleeding. The organization could also consider shoring up the coaching staff, bring in a special teams consultant, evaluate line coaching responsibilities, and make sure the defensive staff is drilling late-game scenarios. What about the mid-long term? The Browns must decide what kind of franchise they are. Do they double down on development, keep drafting and developing young players, and accept a rebuild over 2 years? Or do they decide they want to be buyers and chase immediate improvement, trading draft capital for help on the line or signing veteran stabilizers who can teach technique fast? Either route is expensive and carries risk. The safer long-term choice is structural. Invest in the offensive line, hire a coordinator who improves situational defense, and build depth on special teams. That's slower but more sustainable. The dramatic choice, firing Stefanski and hunting a new coach, is risky and rarely yields immediate turnaround without significant roster investment. Now the human reality. The locker room will feel this. Players watch how organizations respond to public failure. If ownership pans out and makes knee-jerk moves that don't match the underlying problem, you risk destabilizing a roster further. If they make smart, surgical changes and show a coherent plan, you buy credibility. Either way, the emotional temperature in Cleveland is high. Fans will judge the team not just by wins, but by how the franchise respects the craft of football. Accountability, preparation, and the little things that show a team has its house in order. One last point on accountability. Coaches get paid to manage pressure. The most damning image from Sunday was not the scoreboard. It was the flags at the end, the kind of mistakes you can usually solve with film, conversation, and discipline. If those errors become a pattern, responsibility flows upward and change becomes inevitable. If they are a one-off cascade in a season of chaos, the smarter play is to fix the structures around the players and give the coaching staff a chance to right the ship. So which is it for Cleveland? Fire Stefanski now and hope grief yields a cure, or stick with the plan and try to fix the leaky boat? The easy answer is the one that gives the crowd a loud release. Pull the trigger now. The harder and wiser answer is to diagnose and treat, shore up special teams and protection, simplify game plans, and evaluate personnel honestly. If, after those changes, the team still sputters, leadership should be ready to make the bigger calls in the offseason rather than chase emotion midseason. Final line, fans wanted action, and they got frustration instead. The Browns handed away a winnable game in the dumbest ways possible. 2 return TDs, late penalties, and protection breakdowns. That's a recipe for rage. But football is ultimately a ledger of choices. Right now, the Browns' ledger shows a mix of coaching, roster, and execution failures. The remedy isn't just a headline hire, it's the patient, surgical work that rebuilds trust on the field. Do the Browns have the patience and the plan to do it? That's the question Cleveland will have to answer, and quickly. You ever notice how one chaotic final series can change the whole conversation overnight? 2 penalties on the Browns in the last 2 minutes, defensive holding and an offside on a play nobody planned to snap, and suddenly a 2-7 season becomes a referendum. Fans don't just grieve losses, they look for someone to pin the blame on. This week, it's Kevin Stefanski's name on the chopping block. Let's unpack what actually happened and why the reaction is so volcanic. The on-field reality. The loss to the Jets wasn't just one bad drive, it was a confluence of failures. Special teams gave up 2 return TDs earlier, which stacked